off by saying good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for this event with Theresa Greenfield, one of our candidates, the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate for the state of Iowa. We will have the other three candidates here this week and next week and the following week as well, so do keep up with that. We have one coming up Wednesday and then another one next Wednesday, I believe, and then Senator Ernst, I believe, is the following Wednesday. So we do make sure that we cover everyone and we have give everyone a chance to meet with us and tell us a little bit about their priorities. But this morning, we're really pleased and honored to be joined by Theresa Greenfield. As I mentioned, she's running for U.S. Senate in the state of Iowa, and we're really happy to have her here with us today. Theresa, thanks for being here.
Well, Drew, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you. I want to thank Lori. I want to thank the Council Bluffs Chambers of Commerce for hosting the event. It's a delight to get a chance to introduce myself. Some of you I've met. I recognize some of these names, and many I haven't. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time to tell you a little bit more about me, but leaving the majority of our time today to just have some conversation with you. I'm most interested in listening and learning, answering some questions, of course, because all of that will help me lead as your next United States Senator. A little bit about me. I'm a businesswoman. I have spent much of my career working in small businesses in particular. I always tell people I ran bean walking crews on the farm as a kid, got a taste for that kind of leadership, but have worked my way up to being most recently the president of a very small commercial real estate company. It was a family-owned company here in the Des Moines area. We had 8 employees. I think it really reflects Iowa, because Iowa is a state of small towns and small businesses, very much like the one that I most recently ran. I'm a mother of 4. My kids are 33 to 27. I'm a military mom. Our little guy's in the military. I'm an empty nester. I love that too. No grandkids yet. And I'm a farm kid. I grew up on a little farm outside of a town of 500. I had a high school class of 24, so grew up that very, very rural life. And I got in this fight to put Iowa first. I really did, to put hardworking families first. My dad always said on the farm, and I think I'm lucky that I learned this, there's no boy jobs and there's no girl jobs. There's just jobs that need to get done. And so I got to help him out on the crop dusting business that he ran, which I loved, but I also got to help him shovel the brown stuff in the barn, which I hated. And I think Washington needs to work a lot more like we do in our hometowns, and where we recognize there are jobs that need to get done and we come together to do that work. We know in Iowa right now, folks are going through really tough times. The pandemic, the health crisis, lives have been lost. Folks are worried about getting ill, but it's also bankruptcy rates at an 8-year high in farm country, highest unemployment across this country, and certainly in Iowa that we've had in a long, long time. People are worried about their small businesses. It is something that I hear as I travel, whether I'm putting miles on my truck or meeting up with folks on teletown halls. People are talking about their businesses. I understand these kind of tough times. I came of age during the farm crisis. I watched many a farm family go bankrupt. I watched small towns dry up, schools close, grocery stores leave. I put myself through college, started out at Iowa Lakes Community College up in Esterville. I'm a proud alum, love that. And of course, I've had some tough times myself too. I was widowed at the age of 24. I know how hard it is to rebuild a life and be a working mom and need childcare and all of those struggles. I spent about 14 years, first 14 years of my career working as a community planner, a city planner with neighborhood groups, planning commissions, town boards, county boards, city councils, all of that. Have a great love for local government and what happens at the local level. But I also learned early on that potholes in the middle of the street, they're not Republican problems and they're not Democratic problems. They're problems that need to be solved. And again, we have to start looking at our issues, not as Republican and Democratic issues, but issues we need to work on, problems we need to solve. I've run small businesses through good times and bad, from a home building company during the Great Recession that was devastating to home builders across this country. People lost homes, lost jobs. I did too. And I ran a commercial real estate company where, again, we had hundreds of small businesses as our tenants. And I loved helping them get started, working with them through, again, tough times. but a lot of successes. Many of them have grown, doubled their size, or even moved on to buying their own buildings and hiring. So that's great. Through it all, though, I have worked hard to really work with anyone to get jobs done. You learn it in business, you learn it in planning. I will tell you, everywhere I go, there are lots of issues that Iowans are talking to me about. Healthcare, number one, COVID, the health crisis, and the economic challenges, particularly for so many of our small businesses. But it's not just our small businesses, it's our local governments, our county boards. But the other thing they talk about is wanting that divisiveness to end. And so I am focused on that and these other things too. And one of the things I think that is also important for all of you to know is I put out a plan. I call it my Small Towns Bigger Paycheck Plan, where I'm really also focused on how we grow Iowa's economy. And I see it and focusing on three things. First and foremost, investing in our workforce by working hard to make sure we have trade schools, technical schools, community colleges be debt free. Just like Iowa Lakes, where I went to. So absolutely every student has a path to gain the skills they need. I met with students down in Red Oak area, for example, who were not going on to anything past high school because they were concerned about the debt. It was keeping them from gaining those skills. And we can't have that happen. Everybody needs to be following a dream and gaining the skills, whether they want to start their own small business or not. Second, growing our small businesses. And I certainly know that they struggle to have access to capital, struggle to have access to credit to get through rough times, and particularly our minority-owned businesses. For them, it's even doubly hard. But that capital needs to be married with our workforce development. I'm going to give you a great example. I met with a young woman in Rembrandt who is going to Iowa Lakes Community College in Emmitsburg to study early family childhood education. She wants to start a daycare center. And goodness knows we've got a shortage of that in this state. And so, you know, if we could find a way to help students like that with their dream, come out of college debt-free, and then make sure we can find ways to get them that capital and credit to start, we might be able to begin to solve some of our childcare crisis, for example. So it was great to meet with her. And then find the infrastructure. And this is something that I certainly am disappointed in both parties. Republicans and Democrats have not gotten a robust infrastructure plan done, frankly, for decades. And it's a problem. It's a problem when it comes to our economy and our ability to compete on the international level. So whether it is fixing bridges, because we're the worst in the nation in Iowa, whether it's bringing broadband to all of us, blocks and dams, sanitary sewer systems, water systems, and everything in between, we have got to begin investing, in my opinion, in our infrastructure that allows all communities, levels that playing field, and allows us to compete and win. So those are just a few of my priorities, but I'm going to leave it at that. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to some conversation. And Drew, do I turn it back over to you?
Yes, thank you, Theresa. We really appreciate you providing that introduction and hitting on some of those key topics. Those are something that we're always watching as well. A lot of those topics. You spoke to workforce, childcare, infrastructure. You know, obviously locks and dams. Us being right on the Missouri is a really big deal. So thank you for touching on several of those issues. Before we get into the Q&A, I have some questions prepared. But for those of you who joined us as participants and attendees, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box, and then I'll be monitoring that as I'm asking and listening to Theresa answer the questions, and then we'll make sure that we get your questions answered as well. So please feel free to do that at your leisure. But the first question that I want to ask you is, as you travel around the state of Iowa, and as you talk to a lot of people at both here in the state, but then also out in DC, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for the state of Iowa and the nation going forward?
Well, I'll tell you a couple things. I'm gonna tell you two things. One, Iowans are talking about healthcare, and I know you're asking about opportunities. I will get right to that. But I think we have to work hard to solve this healthcare issue because one, it's keeping people, small businesses from growing. It's keeping people locked in jobs who are getting employer-based healthcare, but they want to start a small business and have concerns. I think there's some real economic downward pressure, not to mention just the realities of farmers that are paying $26,000 a year, or seniors that are being gouged, or just everyday Iowans. And so that's a downward pressure I think that we need to solve so we can grow. Opportunities, got all kinds of them here in Iowa. But I'll tell you something that really I think is a huge opportunity for Iowa is for us to grow and lead in a renewable energy economy. There is so much opportunity. One of the things that I published was called My Fair Shot for Farmers Plan. And it doesn't deal just with farmers, but it does deal with forward looking when it comes to growing our economy, whether it's rebuilding trade in those markets back. Exporters want robust markets, and we've absolutely seen with haphazard trade policies and I think abuse of our Section 232 tariffs, a lot of downward pressure. Second, leveling the playing field out there, so ending the go-it-alone approach so we can grow, but also focusing on investing in our renewable energy industry is a huge opportunity. We see it with wind, we see it with solar, we see it with biofuels. And I want to invest in research to understand, what is the future of our biofuels. But one of the things that I'm most excited about, well, two things. One, bio-based manufacturing. I want to understand and do the research on what else we grow here and how do we manufacture and produce it, and how do we export it, not only outside of Iowa in our own country, but around the world, because we have enormous resources here with our land, our 30 million acres that we cultivate. And then second, I see a huge opportunity investing in conservation. I want to make conservation a new commodity for our farmers, for our landowners, for our rural areas, in a way that, one, makes sure that they're getting compensated for sequestering carbon, leading in that renewable energy industry, improving our soil health. That all of that will help certainly clean up our waters. It'll grow jobs, and it'll certainly uplift our rural economy. So I think if we couple being forward thinking on how we lead in a renewable energy future, because we've already shown how to do it with wind, and making those investments in conservation, I think that just has a lot of opportunity for Iowa.
Well, thank you very much. You touched on a lot of critical topics. Here in Council Bluffs in Southwest Iowa and Pottawatomie County, we have Sire, who does a lot of production of ethanol and other byproducts of that. And just a couple of years ago, we were happy to get that renewable chemical production tax credit passed at the state level, and that's a really exciting offering from IEDA, Iowa Economic Development Authority. So that's something I'm happy to hear, because I think there's a lot of opportunities as we talk locally about entrepreneurship in areas to grow our economy, not only here in Council Bluffs, but Iowa. That's something we always talk about. So it's really exciting. And then obviously we have great research institutions like Iowa State and University of Iowa doing some great things in that area as well.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from one of our attendees, and it's Chad Hannon. He's a city council member, and he also works at Ameristar Casino. He said, "You have touched on infrastructure. What plans or vision do you have for how we can close the funding gap on local infrastructure needs? Council Bluffs is more than 25 years behind on infrastructure replacement, with no ability to close that gap. Our citizens simply cannot afford to pay the taxes necessary to catch us up." So again, what proposal do you have to close the funding gap on local infrastructure needs?
Chad, great question. Thanks for putting in the chat. I'm sorry if I don't see you on the screen here. One of the things that I have done, again, I have a deep appreciation for local government and that relationship with the federal government. I have been reaching out to mayors in all 99 counties, visiting with them about some of their needs. I always tell people, if you've been to one small town, you've been to one small town. Because every small town has something really special. They really do. But they also have needs that are unique. Whether it's surface water improvements for that supply their water system, whether they're on a river and it's locking dams, or they're dealing with flooding and drought. I mean, every one of them has a different need. And certainly I've reached out to mayors across the state. Again, I don't care if they're Republican or Democrats. Mayors represent their cities all the time, all their people, all the time, and we need to have more of that kind of commitment to representation in the future. So infrastructure, you're right. We are 25 years behind, and how do we make that up? Well, one, I think that it's an investment, and we're going to have to look at it as an investment. I am assuming all of you here have a good sense of business, that you understand we have to invest in capital. I know we certainly did in all of my businesses. Some of that is leveraging debt as an investment so that you can grow. And we haven't had the leadership to really look at our infrastructure to do that. And I think hence we're behind the 8 ball, shall we say, 25 years behind for Council Bluffs, from according to Chad. And so we're going to have to do that kind of investment. I tell you what, I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have done what Senator Ernst did, which is vote for a tax bill that increased our debt by $2 trillion and giving the majority of those benefits to the largest corporations and the most incredibly wealthy, leaving really most of us behind and having to carry that debt. So when it comes to tax policies, first and foremost, I'm going to be focused on Iowans, hardworking families, our middle class, our small businesses, making sure we're not doing things on the backs of them. But here's 3 great ways I think that we can help to pay for things. 1, Medicare should negotiate and be required to negotiate to bring down prescription drug costs. Senator Ernst refuses to support this. 1, it will put a few pennies and nickels and dimes and dollars back in the pockets of our seniors. That's important. 2, it's estimated to save us as taxpayers $500 billion. It's a lot of infrastructure that could be invested in with $500 billion. It's a $500 billion. Next, we need to end a lot of the loopholes that allow corporations to ship their jobs overseas. That economy, we need to grow it here. We need those jobs here. We need that industry here. And that, again, will continue to increase and make for our economy be more robust. And then we have to look at lots of things across our tax policies. For example, I think we need to end tax credits to big pharma that allows them to run TV commercials. Those are huge dollars that aren't building bridges, aren't paying down debt, aren't providing broadband internet. They aren't investments that help us as an economy to compete and to grow and to meet the needs of our local community. So those are some of my ideas. Chad, I look forward to talking to you. I would absolutely like to learn more about your ideas too.
Thanks, Teresa. And one thing I want to ask as well, I mentioned Chad's on city council. We have the mayor on here. We have some state legislators on here. We have some, local leaders, obviously, local elected officials on here. So I wanted to ask, and you've touched on it a little bit in talking to them, but can you touch and expand a little bit more about how you would work with local government leaders at the state, county, and the city, county, and state level if elected?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Drew. Well, to begin with, even as part of my campaign, I have made a concerted effort to reach out to mayors. I've reached out to some county boards, reaching out to Chamber of Commerce, Metro Alliances, Iowa business councils, all stakeholders across the state, to just really make sure that they know that I'm looking for the opportunity to connect and that their voices are incredibly important. And that's what I'm going to Washington to represent. But again, because I will tell you, all my years working as a city planner, you learned really quickly that if stakeholders aren't at the table, it didn't matter what neighborhood meeting you were at, whether you were tackling an issue on trails, whether you're tackling an issue on road improvement plans, neighborhood revitalization, economic development projects, you really have to work hard to make sure you're getting those stakeholders at the table, or the plans ultimately failed. They just weren't able to be implemented, weren't able to get the investment, or just could not gain the community support. And so this is something that's near and dear to my heart to work hard to do. I will continue to reach out, be available, and make that part of my leadership as your next senator. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to give a shout out of respect to all the electeds that are on. So thank you for showing up this morning, electeds.
Thank you. And yeah, I echo that as well. Thank you all for being here. It's always great to see support from our public sector friends as well as our private sector friends. So we have a question from Eric Nost, who's the superintendent of Lewis Central Community School District. How do you plan to support education in your role as U.S. Senator?
Good morning, Eric. Thanks for getting up early. Of course, you do that every day, but thanks for coming out to today's meeting. Well, I think that education is just the backbone of our economy, our communities. It's how we make sure that all of us can have a shot at our American dream when it comes to education. I will tell you first and foremost, I really believe that public dollars go to public education. And that will be certainly something that I'm going to be focused on, is how we build a strong public education system. I'm going to talk about three things, Eric, that are important to me. It is not inclusive as to what we need to do with education. Well, maybe four. One, as part of our infrastructure plan, we need to look at our facilities. Education facilities are included in that. But then the other three things. One, we have to invest in a universal pre-K. We have to make sure that every child is ready for kindergarten. And I'll tell you, I've had mayors talk to me about this across the state, really wanting to make sure that every child is ready for school. Two, coming out the back end of that, and I spoke to it a little bit earlier, I think Democrats talk an awful lot about four-year education, and I love it. I have a four-year degree myself. But I am focused on trade schools, technical schools, community colleges, how we get deep into our high school system and connect those, so people are building skills and getting that first step to pursue an education or a dream. Again, I headed off to Iowa Lakes Community College. I was a product of progressive leaders. It was Republican Governor Bob Ray and his crew. They invested about 75% of the cost of that community college education. And so I was able to get a job as a waitress at a Pizza Hut, and, able to pay my rent and buy books and pay for my tuition, and have a little money left over to have some fun with my friends. We have to get back to that kind of investment. I didn't know what I wanted to study when I headed off to community college, but just heading down that path got me going. And again, we have too many students, I talk to them all the time, that aren't even starting. And then three, and I'm going to just be clear, this is near and dear to my heart. I have a son that has had special needs, and I think that we have been reducing our support of special education, and we need to get back to continuing to support special education with funding. I don't think we've ever been able to fully fund it. That certainly would be a goal of mine. I'm not sure that we'll reach it, but the funding's been declining, and that doesn't mean the responsibilities for educating our students with special needs has been reduced, and it shouldn't. But we need to make sure those resources are there so that every child really does have a shot at living independently, providing for themselves, having a real shot at building their American dream too. And I think that burden on our local school districts is something that federally we need to take a look at and make sure that we're increasing that investment. So those are three things, Eric, maybe four within the infrastructure thing, where I'd like to focus investments.
Our next question comes from State Senator Tom Shipley, and he asks, the proposals that Mr. Biden brought up at the recent forum included retiring land and then laying out a plan as to what would be grown. This would be disastrous for rural communities and beginning farmers, as the CRP has done. How do you respond to this?
Well, I'll let voters decide what they think about the two presidential candidates. I'm running for the United States Senate, and I think if you take a look at my Fair Shot for Farmers plan, one, I have to tell you, I got in this race because of our current farm situation. I went to auctions where families went, the contents of their homes are put in cardboard boxes. They were put out on hay racks and auctioned off for $1 or $2 because they were going bankrupt. I graduated high school in 1982 when interest rates were 21%. And today, with, I believe, haphazard trade and reckless tariffs, bankruptcy rates are at an 8-year high, and we certainly know net farm income is significantly down since 2013. And so my plans include really investing in ag. One, investing in conservation. So it's an economic driver. It's a new commodity. We all, as a community, benefit from that investment. And I think that whether it's sequestering carbon or helping to improve soil health, but also I think that our rural communities, our landowners, our farmers need to economically benefit too. It's a resource just like wind, and we need to make those investments. With farmers at the table, working with me, certainly I would love to see us become the first, net zero ag industry in the world. I'd love for the United States to be that, but it has to be in a way that is an economic driver for those businesses, farmers. And so that's what I'm going to stay focused on. So whether it's leveling playing fields and markets or competition, investing in future opportunities, bio-based manufacturing for one, investing in that renewable energy sector, which I see as a huge opportunity, and a lot of that will benefit our rural areas, and then investing in conservation. That's where I want to focus. You guys can all decide what you think about our presidential candidates.
And I don't want to be respectful of your time. I know we had you scheduled till about 9 o'clock, but I want to ask one last question. Obviously we've seen numbers continue to rise when it comes to COVID-19. And, I know a lot of people, and I've heard both people in the healthcare industry, leaders in the healthcare industry, but also local officials like our mayor, talk a little bit about the concern they have as, cold and flu season starts. And as we move indoors, and as, some of those issues may be exacerbated, by some of those factors. So, COVID-19 relief continues to be a really popular, talking point. And I'm sure this is something you talk about a lot as you travel around the state. So I'm really curious to kind of get your thoughts on what you're hearing around Iowa and what people's top priorities are and what your top priorities are in that regard.
Mhm. Well, I think this COVID-19 pandemic and economic crisis are going to be one of the most consequential events of our time. And I think Washington has failed us on this. I've been calling for a phase 4 stimulus package for months. And Iowans, and again, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democratic Iowan, we've been left behind. We need help out here. There are 3 buckets of help that I think are really, really critical. One, health and safety. We have got to invest in the PPE, the testing, the contact tracing. We need a statewide mask mandate. Even the White House Task Force is asking for that for Iowa. We wear those masks because we're taking care of our community. Second, the investing in our workers. Again, our workforce is how our economy chugs along and grows. And so they have to, with unemployment so high, we have to make an investment in extending unemployment benefits, possibly direct payments. We need emergency temporary standards. The federal government should be leading on that. So every business, every employee, every nonprofit, we have a really clear idea of how we can operate in a way that is keeping us all healthy and safe. And setting those standards at the federal government to really, really be clear. And then 3, our economy. And again, I've done well over 300 events across this state in person. People are staying home, so we're doing them teletown halls, we're doing Zoom, we're doing meetings like this. But we've been meeting with folks, all 99 counties. I don't care if you're running a coffee shop, your bowling alley, your brewery, and so many other businesses. Again, their cash flow's down. And so I think we absolutely have to have another round of PPP. But talk to county boards, and I haven't talked to all of them. Talk to mayors. Local governments, not all of them, but many of them are really struggling. And so we've got to take a look at some direct aid to those local government sources also, something that they're going to need. And that's where our police officers and first responders and sanitation workers, that's where they're all employed. We got to make sure our communities are operating and keeping us healthy and safe. So that's where I'd get started. And I really appreciate, Drew, the opportunity to join you all this morning.
Do you mind if I ask one more question? It comes from the mayor.
Okay.
So the mayor has a question, and he typed it right as I was asking the last one. You touched on workforce. Obviously, that's a key issue. We just hired a workforce development director here at the Council Bluffs Chamber. It's been a really good resource to offer our members. But the mayor asks, Iowa's population growth is for all extent and purposes stagnant. In typical economic times, there's low levels of unemployment. Economic growth relies on a workforce that has a diversified set of skills. What do we need to do to mitigate our workforce shortage?
Mayor, good morning. Nice to visit with you and everyone again. Well, I talked about workforce development, and so I'm not going to repeat that in terms of that investment in education. coupling it with, I think, small business development. But one of the things that I hear all over the state, and I'd be curious about your priorities, is making sure that we're modernizing our immigration system. Whether I am talking to, the Aid Council, whether I'm talking to a Metro Alliance group, whether I'm talking to nonprofits, immigration organizations, mayors around this state, police chiefs across this state. We need to welcome new Iowans. And of course, we know how to do it. Governor Bob Ray showed us how to do it so long ago by welcoming refugees. And so we have to modernize our immigration system. I'll try to be quick. There's a bipartisan group called the Iowa Compact on Immigration. I like some of the ideas that they've put out. They're focusing on, I'm going to say 3 things: modernizing our visa system, so that we are welcoming all employees, all workforce, because I don't care if I'm talking to the trades, or if I'm talking to scientists, if I'm talking to educators, if I'm talking to healthcare. There's a need to grow our workforce. 2, of course, we have to be focus on health and safety. We can be safe and we can be strong, but we've got to be smart about it. And in particular, our ports of entry are a location for that. And then finally, it has to be humane. We have to keep families together. Every community leader will tell you that when immigrants come with their whole family, they're a lot more successful. They put down those roots, they start those businesses, they stay at jobs for a longer time. And that also begins with making sure that our DACA recipients get their path to citizenship quickly, and that their families also are able to stay with them. So there's one place I would get going on workforce, but Mayor, be delighted to take some time and hear from you and a little bit more about your community too.
Well, thank you, Theresa. And I appreciate your flexibility to answer one last question. And I'm so happy to hear you talk about the compact on immigration, because that's something I've been involved with when it first kind of started. I was happy to hear you note those things, because in my past life in Ames, that was something we had signed on to as when I was the director of public policy there. So I'm very happy to hear you talk about that, and I'd welcome an opportunity to talk more about those questions and workforce in general, about things that we're doing. But right now, I obviously need to say thank you for your time, and thanks for being with us. And have a good day. I'm sure you have a busy day with 15 days to the election.
Yep, I'm sure you all have a busy day too. So be well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to introduce myself, and of course to say hello to folks I've already met a few times. Have a wonderful day, Drew.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for joining us.